Hello, everyone, and welcome to What's New in Calcite with version 3.0. Today, the Calcite team members are joining in from across the United States, and we're going to be showcasing Calcite's 3.0 breaking change release, including some highlights, some new components, and UI updates to enhance your apps. Before we get started, some of Calcite's talented team members, comprised of designers and developers, will introduce themselves and answer today's question of, if you could visit any place in the world, where would you go? So I'll introduce us first. My name is Kitty Hurley, and I'm a product engineer on Calcite, based in the Twin Cities of Minnesota. And if I could go anywhere in the world, I'd return back to Italy for the amazing cuisine and to explore its history. Next up is Franco. Can you tell folks who you are and what you do at Esri? Franco, I don't know if we could hear you. Could you try your mic again? Yeah, we'll come back to you, Franco. We'll introduce Matt G. While Franco works on his microphone there. Matt G.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm a designer for the Calcite Design System team here at Esri, and I'm in beautiful New Hampshire now, but if I could go anywhere, I'd like to go to Tokyo, Japan, because I love cities, and that's the city of cities, right? So that's me. I don't know if we'll go back to Franco, or maybe we'll just move on to Matt.
Yeah, Matt D, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us who you are
Good
and what
morning,
you
YouTube. My name is Matt Driscoll. I'm a software engineer on the Calcite Design System. I've been at Esri for about 15 years. And if there's a place I can go, the next on my bucket list is Cook Islands or Fiji, somewhere tropical and beautiful. So that's what's next on my list.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt D. Ambish, how about you? Tell us about who you are and what you do at Esri.
Hi everyone, this is Anvesh. I work as a software engineer for Calcite. I've been with Calcite for the past three years. If I had to go somewhere in the world, I would like to go to Iceland. It's a beautiful place. I've seen a lot of videos and pictures online. So yeah, that's my go-to spot. And I'm based out of Austin, Texas.
Awesome. Thanks, Ambish. Very cool. Eric, how about you?
Hey everybody, my name is Eric and I've been with Esri for, I guess this is my 5th year now. Been all on the Calcite team as well, and if I could go anywhere, I'd probably go to either Copenhagen or Amsterdam and try to just like immerse myself in the bike culture there. I'm also based out of Portland. That's probably one reason why I'm a bike nut. So, yep.
Very cool, Eric. Aaron, how about you?
Hi everyone, I'm Aaron, a designer on the Calcite team. I'm based out of Long Beach, California. If I could go anywhere, I would go to New Zealand. It's been on my list for quite some time. Hoping to check that one off pretty soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron. Franco, see if we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Okay,
perfect.
awesome. I was nervous. Hi everyone, I'm Juan Carlos Franco. I'm the dev lead for Calcite. I'm based in Redlands, California, and if I could go anywhere in the world right now, it'd be Japan. It's been on my list for a while, so never been. So excited to go there someday.
Very cool. I think that's the most original places across the board. So thank you all for sharing that, folks. Now that we've gotten to know each other, we want to dive into today's topics. So first up, I'll hand it back to Franco to speak to some of the highlights with the version 3.0 breaking changes. Franco, take it away.
Awesome. Hopefully you can see my screen right now. Awesome. Cool. So as you can see, I'm going to go into some of the notable breaking changes that we have at 3.0. Fun stuff. So let's get right into it. So one of the main things that you'll notice is that pick list and value list are now removed. The The reason for this is that we wanted a single unified experience, and going with one component seemed like the best approach for this, especially after hearing some user feedback. So what you'll want to do is go check out the list documentation page and make sure to check all the properties and events and update accordingly. You should be able to configure your list to support both for the pick list and value list use cases. So go ahead and check that out. Next up, we have some properties that have been removed. They've been deprecated for a while, so at each major release, we go ahead and remove some of these properties. So I called out a few of these. So for action group, you'll want to, if you were using the layout property on actions, on the group itself, you'll want to make sure to set it on whatever the action's parent container is instead. And that'll set the property accordingly to whatever groups are inside. On the color picker, we removed the previously hide channels, hide hex, and hide safe properties and attributes. And these now map to channels disabled, hex disabled, and safe disabled. For shell panel, similarly, if you were using detached hide scale or detached, you'll now be using hide scale or display mode. For table, zebra is now striped, and you'll be able to see more of these deprecations and removals on the documentation site, which I'll show at the end. Also, we removed some custom properties that were tied to some existing global attributes, so we went ahead and removed those. So if you were previously using enter key hint, or input mode with hyphen separated, you can now go ahead and use the global attribute instead, or the property, whatever is most convenient for you. We did this to align with the platform, and this should help us align more with the web. It affects input number, and input text. So if you're using these properties, go ahead and make sure to make that change. Should be simple. Chip now requires a label. This was done to improve accessibility because it would default by using the label, which isn't always providing enough context. So by enforcing the label, we can make the component and its use cases more accessible by providing more information specific to what the chip represents. Pretty straightforward. If you're using chip, make sure to set a label on them. Next up, if you were using filtering in combo box or list, by default, the value property of each of the items would get used for filtering or included. In 3.0, this is value is no longer used for filtering. So, and one of the main reasons is because whenever you got a match, it was not visually apparent that where it came from, and also it requires someone that's doing the filtering to actually know what the underlying value is. So this is no longer included. There is a way to opt into including value for filtering if this is what you want. So what you want to do is either use the filter props property or on the parent component, or if you can set the metadata on each of the items. And I have here simple demo here that shows how to do that. So for example, I have a combo box here with different items using a special value here. So if I look for one of these, by default, it won't get included, but this first example is using filter props, and I'll show how that looks like. It's pretty straightforward. You just pass an array of whatever properties from the component that you want to be from the items that you want to include in filtering. Or if it's easier for you to update the items themselves, you can use the metadata. So similarly, if I use a special code, it'll find the proper item, and that looks like this, where you can set the metadata object on any item, and then whatever is in that metadata object gets included in filtering. So it gives you a little bit more power and flexibility for filtering experiences. All right, moving on. So now list has, we introduced 2 display modes because list had some special, we ended up running into an issue where some use cases required less space than others, especially when it came to nested list contexts. So in order to make it more predictable for developer use cases, we introduced a display mode. So depending on whether your list is flat or nested, you'll use the appropriate property there. And what that looks like, I'll show right here. So you can tell here, if I hover over the list item, it's pretty condensed, the spacing for flat mode. And if I had a nested list, by using the nested mode, I get a bit more spacing so that everything's aligned properly, especially if items might be updated at runtime. So you don't have any shifts of items in terms of their spacing. So pretty straightforward. You just would set the display mode on a list and it just gets applied properly. Cool. Next up is any component that has a floating UI element to it. So anything that has like a drop-down or similar to anything that behaves like a popover or a tooltip. We made some changes to that in 3.0 so that it impacts layouts even less. There were some scenarios where, depending on your HTML structure, it might cause some scroll bars. So this should no longer be the case. There might be some cases where if you had a floating UI component in a container that had a scroller, you might see difference in behavior there. If that's the case, make sure to use overlay positioning fixed, and that should take care of any issues you might see. But by default, it should not produce any scrollers. Sorry, with the exception of if you had a scrolling container and we're not using fixed, it could cause some scrollers in that case. Up next is the list received an enhancement to improve keyboard navigation. Items can now be dragged. Well, they were able to be dragged with the keyboard now, but in 3.0 we introduced like a drop-down, and I'll show this in a little bit. It's a drop-down with some options to give you better control of where to move the item to. If you have any code that is using keyboard interactions to move items around, you might need to update this, but just more of a heads up. So for example, in 2.0, I could navigate with a keyboard and then move items around. But if I change this to 3, let it load, you'll see now that the behavior is when I press space, it'll now give me a list of options of where to move the list to. And this will also allow you to move items between lists. So it's a pretty neat enhancement that might require some attention if you have any code moving items. Next up, if you were using Flow, you might remember that when you remove items, it's removing. When you're navigating between different Flow items, the elements themselves would get removed from the DOM. So you as a developer had to manage the children yourself and manage that state. That is changed in 3.0. Now all the items remain on the DOM, and then we update a selected property on each of the items. So you no longer need to keep track of which items should be placed where to control the navigation, the hierarchy. I can show what this looks like. So this is 2.0, for example. I have a flow with 3 flow items. I'll just skim this here, but there's 3 items here. And when I navigate, here, I'm listening to the back event, flow item back event, and then just logging the status of the flow's children and the flow itself. So if I go back into version 2, you'll see that instead of 3 children, I now have 3 on the DOM, and then that's reflected here. And if I dig even further, like now there's 1 item, same, so one child. So if I change that to the latest version, to version 3, wait a second, there we go. You'll now see that if I navigate, I still have my 3 items. So, and all this is managed through the selected property. No more need to keep track of children and updating that. So that's should simplify a lot of use cases. Yeah, and if I navigate one more, same, DOM remains unaffected, except for the attributes. Cool. Next up, I have progress is now using 0 to 100 to represent its value. Before, it would, in version 2, it would go from 0 to 1. The reason we did this is because we have other similar components that follow the 0 to 100 range, so we went and updated it for consistency. This one's pretty straightforward. If you were using a 0 to 1 value, you'll just need to map it to 0 to 100. You can either do it directly, or if you have a mapping function to take care of that, that can also work. And I'll just like to wrap it up just by suggesting to check out the Calcite doc site for additional information on breaking changes and additional key enhancements and fixes. You can go to the main doc site here, which will share links in the chat, and then you can explore everything that changed for 0. And with that, I can hand it back to you, Kitty.
Awesome. Great stuff, Ranko. We did have a couple questions come up in the chat. One, it looks like is unrelated to 3.0, but might be a good one for you to answer. It's from Alexander, who asked, will you be going back to distributing your Tailwind config with Calcite on NPM? I use the Tailwind configuration with my React apps and Calcite to maintain consistency in styling, and currently I have to pull from GitHub.
That's a good question. So right now, I believe we do have the preset inside of the minor repo. We've discussed publishing that as a package. We just haven't gotten to it because we're also moving more towards CSS, custom CSS props and design tokens. So from that perspective, we are exploring an option to provide a package that could leverage the design tokens. We're still thinking what the best approach would be there, but that is still a possibility for this year. No set deadlines at this point.
Awesome. Thank you, Franco. We also had a question on Experience Builder that we'll follow up with folks on. And Alexander also asked a question working in a disconnected environment, wondering if there will be additional documentation provided for those previous versions with all the API changes. And the answer for right now is no. We currently only provide the latest, but we do provide the change logs and summary in between for that, like go between for folks at this time. Awesome. Well, thank you, Franco. Really appreciate your update. If anyone has additional questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. We can always answer them at the end as well. Next up, we have Matt G to introduce the global token for focus color. Matt, take it away.
Hello, hello. Thank you, Kitty. Let me share my screen. So I've got a pretty quick update for everyone today. The current, or rather old implementation for focus color is that we didn't have a dedicated token for it. So it would inherit the brand color. So you can see on the right here as these themes are rotating through, this focus color on the third chip here aligns with the brand color, which can be ideal, but in many cases with a lot of heavier theming, what will happen is that focus color can get lost, which is a large accessibility concern. So now we have included the Calcite color focus token that can be modified at the global or semantic level or specific to a component. This instance on the right hand side here, we're looking at a danger button where within the context of that button, I'm going to open the code pen here just for clarity, you can modify this to be our danger semantic token so that when it is selected or tabbed through, clicking or otherwise, you can see that it has the unique red outline for the focus color here instead of the brand. And for clarity, by default, the focus token will inherit the brand color by default still, but you can obviously go and customize that at whatever level that may be necessary. And this is the current implementation. Shout out to the documentation site again that Franco mentioned. You'll see now this version 3.0 at the bottom. You'll see that this instance of the chip group shows that the focus color remains consistent with that blue color. That is our default instead of aligning to brand in this instance. And that's just about it. So just as a reminder, we have the Calcite color focus token that can be utilized at those different levels. That's actually all for me. So I'm going to toss it back to you, Kitty.
Awesome. Very cool stuff, Matt. We did have a question come up in the chat. It doesn't relate to tokens. Just wait to see if any folks have any in the meantime. The question is from Roberto. What about the integration with the Esri JavaScript Maps SDK? Right now, the release is 4.31, is using 2.13.2 in Calcite. Are you planning on a new 4.32 to use Calcite 3? And the answer is yes. That will be coming later on this month for folks. So stay tuned for more there. We don't see any other questions in the chat for the focus color demo, but the demo that Matt showed is linked in the chat for folks. So please check that out. But awesome job, Matt. All right.
Thank you.
Next up, of course. Next up, we have Matt D. To talk about our new component, Autocomplete. Take it away, Matt.
Thank you, Kitty. Let me share my window real quick. All right, so in Calcite 3, we have a new component called Autocomplete. And this component was designed to handle queries of large amounts of data in order to select a single item. And so most of the time, these queries will be done asynchronously so that you can search things like a large database to find a single tag or a single item from that. So it relies on developers to provide those lists of suggestions to the user. And that's a little different from other components where you kind of just set up the data all at once and it's just ready to go. This component, the filtering and querying is done by the developer, so that part is handled by them basically. And it provides a way to select a single suggestion from the list. So some of the usage would be like searching a long list, returning different items to a user based on whatever they type in. And we have a sample here, but this I should mention this documentation isn't on production yet, so it's still being worked on, and that means the sample isn't quite finished. But I do have a code pen to show as well that kind of gives a better demonstration of how this all works. But it's very similar to an input and a dropdown. So if I focus on it, I can see the results there. And in this example, it's just showing a list of fruit, and I can see the code for that. Use Calcite autocomplete. I set a custom placeholder, select the fruit, and then as a developer, I would slot in these Calcite autocomplete items, and they would basically be what's presented to the user, right? So we have a bunch of properties that users can set. For example, there's a loading property, kind of gives a little visual indication that something's happening. I can disable it. I can set it to be open or not open. Another important one would be like scale. I can choose different icons instead of just the default search icon. And then I can set whatever the value is for the input. So whatever that is there is what the user would basically type in. There's also a separate value. That's what the user selected from the dropdown would get put into this value. So that's kind of the basics of it, how it kind of works. We can go through some of the best practices. People may wonder what's the difference between this and combo box component. It's similar visually, but this one's used with a large amount of data, so an unpredictable length of items, large data. Whereas the combo box would be something where there's a finite amount of items that you would just place in it from the get go, and so you're not firing off queries while the user types in. And that's kind of the main difference. Another difference is combo box allows selection of multiple items, whereas autocomplete doesn't. That may be something we add in the future, but at this point in time, it's a single value. And so kind of it gives some use cases for each of them and recommendations. Do use autocomplete when there's an unknown or large number of items of records. Avoid using autocomplete for known small number of items. When a user can select a single choice, it's a good option. But if it is multiple selection needed, right now it's not the best option for that. It also covers some accessibility. So this component is accessible by keyboard. So user can tab into it, use arrow keys to select items, hit enter, stuff like that. Then we go through all of the properties in the API. I'm not going to go through all these. A lot of them are very similar to the input because it uses the Calcite input internally, so it inherits all those properties, as well as a few more for setting it to be open because it's a drop down. And then the slots. A developer would slot in Calcite autocomplete item elements, and that would be the suggestions shown to the user. We also have a couple other slots for slotting in different content above or below that. So content bottom, content top. And this is where you may want to put some like warning messages that like, hey, I couldn't find anything, or there's an error or something like that. And then we have all these styles that allow you to customize the component to theme it specifically to your needs. The events. So a lot of these are very similar to input as well. So like we have Calcite autocomplete change. This is fired anytime a new value is typed and committed. We have all the open and close events. And then we have text input events. So anytime something is typed in or typed in and committed. And similarly, a lot of these methods are pretty similar to other components as well. So let's look at a better example, I guess. So in this example, using the locator task from the Maps SDK, and what it's allowing me to do is type in an address, so I can put red, and I can get a list of all the addresses there. And so if I inspect the console, I can see that it's firing off queries and giving me suggestions for each of those. So this way, I'm not having to populate this dropdown with the hundreds of thousands of records of addresses. It allows me to query those as I need by sending this text to that service. So let's look at the code. Just Calcite autocomplete, my placeholder. What I'm doing is I'm importing the suggest locations query task from the Maps SDK. I then get a reference to my autocomplete. And how I would display suggestions to the user is the developer is going to listen to the Calcite autocomplete text input event. And that's what we're doing right here. And then we get the value, the input value of the autocomplete. And then if we don't have any value, we're just going to clear the autocomplete's value and get any existing suggestions out of it. Then what we're going to do is we're going to query and get suggestions based on this input. So in this query, we're basically just clearing out the autocomplete, setting it to open. We get suggestions based on the autocomplete's input value, and I'm telling it just give me back 5 because I don't need that many. And then I'm also sending a signal for the abort controller. So if a user keeps typing, it'll cancel the previous request and abort it. So if it's aborted, we'll just stop there. If we get no results, then I'm going to show a Calcite notice, and I'm going to slot it into the content top of the autocomplete. I'm going to set it open, give it an icon of information, and saying there's no results here. Try something else. So if I type something that's not going to be found, then I see that warning message there, and I can get rid of it. But if we do have results, then we're going to create Calcite autocomplete item elements. We're going to set their value to the text of that, set their heading to the text, and append them into the default slot of the autocomplete. So that's where if I type POM, I'll see those different results. And if I hit enter, it'll select that one. So if I want to handle a selected suggestion, so this was when a user types something and they click on it or they hit enter on a specific result, we're going to listen to the Calcite autocomplete change event right here. And this will use the value property from the autocomplete. So in this sample, all we're doing is setting the input value to equal the value that was selected. So that may not be the ideal use case in every scenario. Like for some use cases, if I select something, you may not want to put it in here, but that was a simple way to show like what's selected here. And then also you could listen to other events like key down. You know, when I hit the enter key, I can populate the value, set the autocomplete to not be open anymore, and then log that value. So we can kind of see how that works. So if I enter red here, hit enter, go to the console, it shows that red. So that's a basic walkthrough of how this works and how you'd set it up. Like I said, it's designed mostly for asynchronous queries to large amounts of data, and that's specifically what it's designed for. Another example here is we have thousands of icons in our icon UI library. So if I want to search them, I could easily set up something to where I can find just a certain amount of ones and not have to populate this whole list with everything right away. So, and also I'm adding an icon to the icon start to the Calcite autocomplete item to kind of give it, what you're seeing there. And I can also change the icon on the autocomplete too. So that's a general overview of the new autocomplete component. Those docs will be up shortly, so if you want to check it out, it'll be there. With that, I'll turn it back to Kitty.
Awesome, Matt. Thanks for sharing that awesome new component. And we did get a question in the chat that I think Matt just answered, that the documentation page for autocomplete is coming soon. So definitely stay tuned for that. We can post an announcement in Esri community for folks that are waiting for that page in particular. But awesome. We also got a really great comment from somebody saying, this is great. With version 2.x, we had to create our own custom autocomplete input with some dark magic. So hopefully this will be useful for you all as well.
Yeah, no more dark magic.
No more dark magic. You heard it here, folks. And then I think that's everything in the chat. But thank you, Matt, for introducing the autocomplete component, and more coming soon for folks. All right, we're going to switch gears, and I'm going to hand it over to Anvesh to talk about our date picker redesign. Anvesh, take it away.
Hi everyone. I'm gonna quickly share my screen. As part of 3.0, we made some changes to the date picker and how the date picker in general behaves and how it looks, both for the UI and the UX related things. Firstly, you see for the range, we have 2 months placed adjacent to each other rather than the 1 month view we had earlier. It helps users to pick a range without need to navigate between the months. It makes their life more easier. And the adjacent month view is for both the horizontal and the vertical layout. And one other noticeable change that we made is for the months to select. Users can now select months from the same view. They don't have to navigate to change the month. They can simply use a drop down, select whichever month they want, and it just updates the calendar. And one other noticeable change that we made is the keyboard behavior, how the users are going to interact with the keyboard. If you see, I'm interacting with tabbing, and the users can tab onto the date. And from there, they can just use the arrow keys to move around the dates in the calendar. They don't have to rely on just the mouse. They can pretty much use arrow keys to even navigate between the months. But for the months, you can use the page up or the page down arrows, so it just changed the month for you. It's pretty helpful for to change between the months. And it does also work in the range date picker. If you see, I can select the range just using the arrow keys, I don't need to use the mouse, and it just adds days. And then even I can update the date using the arrow keys, or the page up keys or the page down keys. So it's just pretty cool feature to have. And if you also observe that the way the selection happens is changed a bit. Earlier we used to use a circular kind of selection. Now it's more square, I would say. And it's much more easy on the eye compared to what we had before. And the properties haven't changed much, so users can still leverage the same properties that they're using, but they're gonna see how the UI, the new UI, and the new user experience. And one other noticeable addition we had for the date picker with this release is tokens. So users can customize how the date picker is going to look like. If they're not happy with the colors, or if they want a theme the date picker to suit their product, they can just leverage all the tokens. And if you see here, I just uncomment these lines, and you see the dates. The day background has changed. All the background is pink, and the text color has changed to green. And there are more tokens that users can use to customize. Like you can customize the hover colors, the inverted hover colors, and have the text color of select menu and the input, and the icon color of the chevrons. That can also be customized using tokens. There are a lot of tokens for date picker that users can configure. With these changes, we also made some changes for the input date picker to accommodate what date picker is doing. In terms of behavior, everything works as expected in the date picker version of it. But if you notice in the input date picker, especially for the range, you don't see a divider between the inputs. So that's pretty much gone. Users can click on the input and tab onto the date picker, update the days. Uh, if you see here, I am just using the keyboard to update the dates. I'm not using mouse, so that's working as expected. And the chevron here is just an indicator. It's not really a clickable chevron. Uh, and you see the chevron is disappeared from the start input. So that's one more minor change that we did for the input date picker. And one other noticeable change that we did is the date picker position is static. It doesn't change when the user switch between the each inputs. Earlier it used to be dynamic, and it switches positions when the user changes between the start and the end input. So that's pretty much static right now. You don't the date picker doesn't move much. And regarding the functionality of the date picker, everything's pretty much same of what you see in the date picker version. So in terms of input, those are the changes that we had. Even in the vertical input date picker, the divider is gone, and we only have chevron here to indicate whether the date picker is open or closed. And even in the vertical layout, you see it spans 2 months. It's not just single month. And the divider is the only change that's pretty noticeable at this point. And the tokens works for should be working for the input date picker. I don't think we configured them yet, but for the date picker they works. And for the future enhancements, we are considering to limit or give the user the ability to switch between having a 1 month or the 2 month view even when the range is enabled. That's one enhancement we are considering for the future. And the ability to disable specific dates or a range of dates. Let's say you don't want the users to select days like the national holidays like Martin Luther King Day. You want to uh, disable particular dates, or you want to disable a range of dates like a whole week. Let's say a Thanksgiving week, you just want to disable the whole Thanksgiving week. That's something that we are considering to add as a part of future enhancements. So that's pretty much it. for the date picker and the input date picker enhancements that were part of 3.0.
Awesome stuff, Amish. It's been a lot of effort on your part, so thank you for all of your great work on the component. We did have a couple of questions come up in the chat, and did notice that the native select dropdown in the component wasn't being shown somehow through like the software. So just know for folks that that's part of the component as well, as part of the updates that Ambesh was showing here today. So we had two questions I think come in the chat. One from Brittany if there are any plans to add a date range picker, for example, allowing the user to select a range of years without needing to select month and days.
Yes, that's in the works that we are planning for this year. We are planning to have a year picker and also a month picker. That's on the roadmap for 2025. You might hear from us very soon.
Awesome. And then one other question from Melanie. Can you also type in the date as well?
That's not yet added. You can't really type the dates for the date picker, but you can type the dates for the input date picker. But the focus doesn't shift between the dates when you start typing between the date in the date picker, but you can type in the input and it just updates the calendar.
Awesome. Thank you, Amvesh. That was great. Really appreciate you showing off all the new work. All right. And then we'll switch over to Eric, who will introduce Time Picker's new 24-hour formatting. Take it away, Eric.
All right. Hi, everybody. Here, I'll go ahead and start my screen share here. So, okay. All right. So in Calcite 3, we've added direct control over the clock for the input time picker. And so now and as well as the time picker as well. So there's a pop-up that will display time picking in this way, and you can also use that standalone. So prior to 3, this was just kind of a managed internally, and it wasn't overridable from the language's defaults clock setting. So this is Calcite 3 demo here that also shows like lots of the locale support that we provide for the time values. So what you can do, and this kind of shows, so for like all of these languages on the left side here, these are locales that are by default a 24-hour clock format, preferred based on the ICU and the locale information that we utilize. So these are showing 12-hour settings for those locales. So these would allow you to show have the user be in control of this, or you can expose this property into your app with like a clock switch of some kind that can enable that. So and it does show its full localization support. So it supports the localized AM and PM values as well. And also will, and this was something that was in before, but it will show the decimal separators for language like Danish, for instance, uses periods instead of colons for the separators, and then also commas for the decimal separators. So that is now controllable via a property called hour format with the dash in between. That's how you would set it in HTML. So on the right side here, I'm just showing a 12-hour locale examples that are in 24-hour format. So now you can take, English, which normally is a 12-hour clock, and you can force it to do 24 hours. So this allows you to allow that in the reverse direction as well. So I think by default, there's the default property value for hour format is called user, and that was something else we added to be consistent with other components that use that same value. So when you don't set the hour format to either 12 or 24, it'll default to just user, which will be the locale's default setting. So kind of the way it used to work before, basically before 3.0 came out. So So that's about it. It's really as simple as that. I think I can also show there. This is up on the doc site. This is an example up on the new doc site. You can select. Notice that the user is the default setting here and the hour format drop down. So I'm on. I have an English locale setting for my browser and operating system. So by default, I'm seeing the 12-hour clock in this case. And so when I select 24, it will definitely show that change being made here. And I can also force it to 12 too, which will switch it back. So that's also demoable on the doc site as well. So that's about it for the input time picker hour format.
Awesome. It's great to see all that new functionality, Eric. You know, that's also been a huge effort on your part the last few months. So kudos to you. That's going to be hopefully a great way for folks to add into all of their apps and UI. I don't see any questions in the chat, but folks following along, there are some of the demos that folks have presented. So Anvesh's are in there and Eric's as well. Actually, we did have a question come in from Alexander, wondering if the input has a type of date time local for support. There's currently a min width in the input box in the shadow DOM, which causes overflows on the shell panel size bars when it's in size medium or small.
I believe that the question is about date time local. I think right now the time picker really just uses like medium length format, and it I have to look into that a little bit more to get a clearer answer. But there is only one sort of time format that it's currently supported. We're considering looking at small and medium, and there's all these different ways that the time can be represented, kind of like dates. But currently, it's really just it's considered like medium support right now. So it's really just like the most common like time representation that people expect. But I'm not sure if that answers the question directly because I need to look into exactly what's under the hood of that question. But it is just that simple right now. So I think we are considering doing a combination date time at some point, but I'm not sure if that's on the roadmap yet.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Eric. And
Cool.
Alexander, if you want to reach out to us, feel free to reach out on Esri community too, and then we can do some more research on our end, and then have more of a dialogue with you as well. Oh, perfect. So Alexander's going to make a PR an issue for us to track. So thank you, Alexander.
Cool.
Awesome. I don't see any other questions in the chat. But Eric, thank you for showcasing the new Time Picker 24-hour formatting.
My
Appreciate it.
pleasure.
All right. We have one more topic for everyone today. This one is featuring Aaron and Eric to talk about our list interaction and selection. So I'm going to hand it over to Aaron. Take it away.
Hello, hello. Let me grab my screen share here. All right. So up top here, we can see the current configuration on version 2. Version 3 is below. The biggest change is all about alignment. We can see here that there's a bit of a zigzag effect in the old version, and it can be kind of difficult to understand that waterfalls, rivers, and estuaries are actually all at the same level of hierarchy as trails. This kind of can get lost. In the new version, it's much more clear. Alignment is a lot cleaner. The borders between items align to the beginning of the item content now to help reduce more of that zigzag effect. And as Franco mentioned earlier, in the nested mode, we are reserving the space here for the chevron. So if the items receive children at some point, they don't shift over, just like on the old version. If I turn this on, you can see how the whole thing has to bump over to make room for it. So that's no longer a problem. We increased the default font size. This was the old here where it was perhaps a little bit small. The new font size matches the medium scale font size of all of our components across the system. And we also see this change from a dot on single select icons to radio icons for single select. We wanted to match the empty state here of the multi-select icon, and we find that in use cases where there's a lot more data density, you've got descriptions, maybe content as well. These dots that can sometimes also be confused for loading indicators can kind of get lost. So multiple fixes in with that change. Moving on, list now has scale. So by default, you have medium scale, and I can show moving this out. We can have small scale, just like most of our components, and also large scale is available for folks who need it. The last change is we added convenience props for icon start and end. You do still, of course, have content start and end. We recommend if you're going to use one, don't use the other. In general, that's our general guidance. But now if you just simply need to add icons to the beginning or the end of your list items, that should be a lot easier. And I think I will hand it over to Eric, who's got a code pen showing much the same thing.
Cool, sounds good. Looks like I don't have permission to screen share. If someone could enable that for me, that'd be great. I think. Looks like the button still doesn't let me screen share. I'm not sure what's going on there.
Maybe while you do that, we had a question come in. So maybe we can do that while you're working on that screen share. So the question is from Roberto on if Calcite 3 improved rendering speed has improved. Franco, would you be able to answer that one?
Sure. Hi. The answer should be yes. If once you start using 3.0, you'll notice some noticeable speed enhancements. There were some changes to the tooling done to build components, so you should be noticing better performance there. If you are noticing any particular rendering issues, please let us know through GitHub issues, and we can look into that further.
Awesome. Thank you, Franco. Eric, would you be able to try again for that screen share?
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's letting me at the moment still. I'm not sure what. Let me see. I don't know if it says your browser doesn't have permission, but I think it's probably could be a setting in the.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to you again. I think we had another question come in, so we'll try and answer that one first. Let you try and work through that. We had a question on, are there any plans to interact with Calcite table and feature table? Franco, would you also be able to answer that one?
I can try. Could you repeat
Perfect.
the question?
Yes. Are there any plans to have the Calcite table interact with the feature table with Maps SDK for JavaScript?
I can't answer that question exactly because that's up to the Maps SDK team, but I can say that we are looking this year to provide a solution for advanced table use cases. We're still looking into whether it's going to be its own dedicated component or if it's going to extend the existing one, but it will be able to support more of the features and that use cases like the Maps SDK feature table relies on, like virtualized item generation, locking, paging, things like that.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for detailing what's coming with the advanced table, Franco. Appreciate it. All right, Eric, it looks like you might have the permissions now. Let's
looks like
see.
it's working
Lots
now.
of lead up to it.
I'm going to go ahead and share screen, and then I'll show you this real quick. So this is the Calcite 3 list demo code pen I created with a lot of the stuff that it's going to showcase a lot of the stuff that Aaron showed in Figma. And so we got like this left side list here with the nesting demoed. And I'm using these icon start slots. And I'm also using like a little custom JavaScript that toggles the open folder when the folder is open. So that's kind of something you can do with the icon, which is neat. And so this is showing that design that he was talking about in the actual implementation. So you see that the borders between the items are lined up correctly, and then the alignment of the elements in the nested view is really looking good here. The middle section just shows the radio implementation, the single select, and the right side is the checkbox stuff as well. Something else that is really good too that was part of this redesign was the drag handles. All the drag handles in different scales now show pretty much as far, they're basically as far left as possible, as far close to the edge of the list item as possible. So when you switch to the different scales, like this is small scale, for instance, it's showing these drag handles in a much more concise way, so that it's giving as much real estate to the rest of the content of the list item as possible. And I'll flip to large to kind of show that too, so you can see the drag handles hover states. You can see exactly where that is there. And these also align in the nested view pretty well, and don't take a. They should be pretty. It should be pretty like vertically and horizontally balanced with the nesting chevrons as well. So, and I'll share this code pen for anyone who wants to look at this later. We'll share all the links to these so that you can kind of see how the code looks for these as well. Cool, and that's all I had to share.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric.
Yep.
Well, those are all the updates that we have for our folks today. But we really hope that folks enjoyed some of the updates that the team has provided. And we're looking forward to seeing folks that can make it to next month's Developer and Technology Summit in Palm Springs. We'll also have a 3-part presentation series for building web apps with web components. So that includes core patterns with the Maps SDK for JavaScript components, using frameworks, and building your user experience with Calcite design systems. So some of the things that you saw here today. But we'll also have a what's new and road ahead session to show you what's coming and some of the great items that you all saw today. And we also have an accessibility session with Maps SDK for JavaScript and Calcite. So we'll post that link also in the chat for folks to follow along. There's some that are live recorded, so folks that can't join in person can also watch the live recordings. And that's all we have for you today. So thank you everybody for joining us. And it was great to see everybody virtually. Appreciate it.